Good morning. My name is Joanna Fortune. I'm truly delighted to be here with you today, and I'm going to talk about our shame society. But before I start, I want to do a quick show of hands just to see where we're starting from. Who here has ever done or said anything that they're ashamed about? Come on. Okay. And who here has ever done or said anything shaming about someone else when they've done something you didn't approve of? Little harder to own up to that one, but that's a lot of hands, mine included. I've had a professional interest in the topic of shame throughout my career, but as I began to work more and more with young people and gain more insight into how they relate and into their world, my interest intensified. I remember being in a school, I was giving a talk to second, third year students, so 14, 15-year-old girls, on the topic of shame and empathy. As part of the talk, I had written out all of these social scenarios on flip chart paper. I laid them out around the room, and I gave each student a handful of blue squares and green squares. And I asked them to go around and to place a blue or green square on each scenario. Blue if you thought it was socially unacceptable, and green if you thought it was acceptable. One of the scenarios that I used was around your friend is drunk at a party and she's hooking up with a guy that you know she wouldn't talk to if she was sober. Footage is taken and it goes viral. Now, I'll admit, I really anticipated that the girls would show empathy for their fellow student, their friend, and they would cover this one in blue squares, deeming it socially unacceptable. But as you can see, that's not actually what happened. About 50% of the students deemed that scenario to be socially acceptable to them. When we talked about it afterwards, they felt that that girl was responsible not only for the footage being taken, but the fact that it was shared because she was drunk. They simply couldn't see it another way. And as we talked a little bit more about it, a huge number of this 50% admitted that they would feel justified in sharing that footage about their friend, if only to teach her a lesson. Now, I'm not actually telling you this story to shock you, although it may well have that effect. Nor am I holding these girls up as a microcosm of what's wrong in today's society, because I don't believe that to be true. I do believe that these girls can give us insight into what it's like to grow up in a shame society today. Now, I want to say a little bit more about that, but before I do, we have to start from a place of acknowledging that shame is a normal, healthy, albeit unpleasant, human emotion. We all experience it. Unless you're a psychopath, but then I'd be here doing an entirely different TEDx talk today. What we have to look at with shame is the impact that it has, and it comes in two forms. Charles Darwin spoke about how healthy shame was indicated by blushing, or what we commonly refer to as going red. Moreover, he saw the fact that we blush is the thing that separates humans from animals. Blushing indicates our discomfort in a situation, our discomfort at having made an error. And feeling that allows us to make amends for that mistake. That's healthy shame. In talking about the other kind of shame, toxic shame, I'm going to rely on the words of Carl Jung, who described shame as a soul-eating emotion. He's talking about that instinct that is stirred up in us when we're in an uncomfortable situation that makes us want to run and hide from it, that makes us want to deny or minimize its impact and push it away from ourselves and onto somebody else. You see, toxic shame is very, very difficult to contain within ourselves, and that's what makes us want to project it outwards. We feel compelled to evacuate it, to eliminate it from ourselves, and we seek to locate that on somebody else that we can say it's their fault. It wasn't me. They made me do it. You see, toxic shame-based people cannot risk showing vulnerability. They cannot afford to show emotions or uncertainty. Things that for most of us underpin our everyday lives, that guide us, motivate us, focus us. This is the essential difference between healthy and toxic shame. Toxic shame is a focus on the self. I am bad. Whereas healthy shame is a focus on behavior. I have done a bad thing, or I have behaved badly. Healthy shame might embarrass us, but toxic shame will mortify us. Let me put that another way. Imagine as I'm talking to you here today, there's a little table here with a glass of water on it. And I'm talking and gesticulating wildly to make my points, and in doing so, I knock that glass of water onto the floor. If I experience healthy shame in response to that, I will become embarrassed, I will blush, I will quickly move to pick up the glass, clean up the water, I will move the glass in from the edge of the table to make sure it doesn't happen again, and I will get myself back on track. However, if I experience toxic shame in response to that event, when the glass spills, I'll freeze. I will think that you're all looking at me and judging me. I will think that you think I did that on purpose. I set out to destroy the floor is going to have to be replaced, and I should never be given water again. Okay, sounds crazy, but that's the thinking that goes behind it. Now I want to go back a bit to that piece around projecting one's shame outwards, and I want to take it a step further and look at how does that contribute to a shame society, and moreover, what does a shame society look like in 2017? Now, a shame society is not a new concept, far from it, and you'd all be forgiven for associating such ideas with religious practices or high moral cultures where we tend to see low levels of tolerance with a high value placed on honour. Think of India, where even being raped can be described as being robbed of one's honour. Think of China, another well-known shame versus honour culture. You know what? Think of Ireland, when the church exerted more control over how we lived our lives, something that isn't that long ago in our history and the reverberations of which can still be felt in society today. These are good examples of how a shame society and how the shame in it, along with that associated fear of ostracization, are used to control the people in society, where the focus is always on shame versus honour. In these societies, the fear and shame of being ostracized from your societal group serves as a control mechanism over your behaviour. But what about today's Ireland? What about today's society in general? Have we freed ourselves from our shackles of shame? I don't think so. I think that we very much still hang on to it, but I do think it has evolved. Think of an area of our lives today, of all of our lives, something that we might actually be addicted to or at least show a very strong compulsion towards. A place where we can be ourselves, or better again, we can be anyone we want, saying anything we want, to anyone we want. Any guesses? Where am I talking about? So yeah, social media. If you have a social media account, you are engaged in a shame society. I know, it's a very uncomfortable truth for all of us, but when you think about it, social media brings out simultaneously the very best and the very worst in each of us while shining a light on what shame society looks like. Look at the myriad of examples of people who have sent a snap, a tweet, a message, a post, and within 24 hours seen their lives, or at very least their reputations, completely destroyed by online vigilantes. There is no end of high-profile examples of this happening, but there are many more minor cases as well of somebody who has simply done or said something stupid online and has gotten attacked by the online herd mentality, often who share the first ill-considered message to make sure as many people as possible see it and can join in with teaching that person how wrong they are to think the way they do. How dare you think differently to the majority seems to be the justification for that online shaming. Social media has so many benefits. It can be such a positive and wonderful place, but you know what? It can also be a lonely, scary, cruel, devastating place with at times ruinous consequences for anyone who dares not follow the social and moral script of the group, for anyone who doesn't fit in. And that leads me to wonder if social media has in fact validated the shame society. Perhaps. And then I think back to those girls that I told you about at the start, those girls who were so quick to normalize shame in their lives. And I'm wondering, is that what has happened to us? We have actually normalized shame to the point that we accept it without even acknowledging its presence. How scary a thought is that? How could that have happened? And moreover, has that seeped from the virtual into the real world? Perhaps. But what we do know for certain is that Online shaming is most effective when it is done by a group rather than by an individual. Sigmund Freud spoke about a herd mentality. He described how an individual's emotional impulses are too weak to amount to anything significant by themselves. So the impulses are entirely dependent on reinforcement of their group. Here we will see that members of the group in these form online bubbles and clusters. And in these clusters, an individual may find that their one lonely voice or opinion suddenly seems amplified. Because you see, the members of the group share not only a passion for their common cause, they also share a rage against anyone who dares to challenge their position on that cause or deviate from their position on that cause. In fact, a deviating thought, statement, or opinion will very quickly be screen grabbed, hashtagged, shared on by all members of the group, thereby ensuring that that dissenting voice is suitably chastised for daring to air an alternative view. This is a very, very difficult way of communicating because what happens is that there can be no learning for either the individual or the group, with the individual simply getting shouted down online. And what you see happen is that both sides then retreat, clinging tighter to their version of the truth, believing it to have been reinforced by the interaction they've just had. Modern shame society is a highly sensitive, highly judgmental, highly intolerant one. And while we like to think that we are living in our most informed time, when we have access to more information than ever before, and we like to see ourselves as a more tolerant society than anything that has come before us, when you scratch the surface, you see that actually it's intolerance that dominates. And that's quite a worrying thought in this day and age. So what I'm saying is that in our most informed time, we have become more judgmental and more intolerant of anyone who does, says, or thinks differently to us. In this new shame society, we will see how little originality and personal courage are to be found online. I saw this tweet last week online. I'm sure it's written tongue-in-cheek, but it also kind of embodies what we're here saying today. Because you see, in these online prisms that form, an individual will feel very much alone, incomplete and exposed and vulnerable without their group. They will carefully guard their thoughts, their words, for fear that they might accidentally transgress some norm that the group has brought into existence. There's strength in numbers, and these clusters will amplify their voices for them. Remember that. So what we are seeing in today's shame society is that not only does it still exist, it has very much evolved in our digital age. I'm going to end this talk today by leaving everyone watching it with a challenge. I want everybody to be honest with themselves about their relationship with healthy and toxic shame. I want you to take time offline, put down the screens, get outside into the real world, into the right here, right now of the world. Think before you hashtag. We have got to get better at talking, reading, reflecting before we respond, without going online first to see how did everybody else respond before we formulate our own opinion. What this is going to mean is that not only can we never eradicate shame, because after all, it is a fundamental part of each and every one of us, we're never going to eradicate it, but it will allow us to break free from that herd mentality that allows a shame society to exist. And that's what we want. Thank you.